Some would argue, Dan, that letting that $17.1 million trade player exception expire is a little bit of a black mark on this front office and the ownership's summer. You look around the league and look, not everybody is spending a gajillion dollars on their team, but like Steve Ballmer does not care. Joe Lacob and the Warriors do not care. They will just find ways. If they have to, spend more money, they don't really care. They're willing to spend it right now to have a real shot at the title. So some would say Wick and Steve and company aren't doing enough to guarantee this team a real shot at the title because they let that expire. Your reaction to that?
I would think that's a little strong. I mean, I think the way they're constructed now, they have as legitimate chance as anybody to win a title. Obviously, nothing is guaranteed. I just think when it comes to the TPE, there's two parts of it, right? Mm-hmm. First, you need to know what offers they turn down to use it, right? Like if it was, a player of real substance that they just didn't want to pay the $60 million in tax, yeah, we should all be upset. If they didn't use it because there wasn't anything of substance out there to use it on, that's less of a big deal to me. But I also think when the offseason started, my hope was that they found ways to improve the roster with all of their available resources, right? I don't think any of us saw, like I said, they brought in Malcolm Brogdon for a ham sandwich. So once that happened, that sort of changed the dynamic of their offseason, where if they didn't make that trade and Brogdon wasn't on the roster and they still didn't use the TPE, I think that's where you can have this black mark on their offseason. But the TPE has always just been, for me, a vehicle to improve the roster. But if there was nothing of substance, the roster has already improved with Brogdon and Gallo coming in. So it's it would have been a nice to have, given, it was a resource that they could have used, but we'll never know what they turned down. We'll never know what was actually feasible. So for me, now that we're sitting at the end or the middle of the offseason where their moves have been mostly completed, I don't see how you could be upset about that, the fact that they didn't use it, because they still got better. They still addressed their needs, which is what everybody wanted them to do at the start of this offseason. They just didn't need to use that particular vehicle in order to do it. So, I mean, listen, I was as big of a TPE guy as you'll find, that was half of the fun during the year, was trying to figure out the players that fit, who might be available. And it's, something where you're not always going to have that type of opportunity to bring in a high salaried player and not have to give up a 7 through 9 rotation player. But then, like I said, they found a way to bring in a $19-20 million player in Brogdon, and they didn't have to use it. Would people care if Brogdon made $17 million and they used the TPE to do it, but then, didn't trade Nesmith and all those other pieces? It's a 6 of one, half a dozen the other in my mind. You still accomplished your goal. You just didn't need to use one avenue you could have to achieve that same result.
Yeah, and it's not like the Celtics aren't paying into the tax quite a bit. And I'm scrolling through Keith Smith's Twitter timeline, and I immediately regret doing this. Not really, because I will mention that Keith Smith's doing a great job of retweeting out teachers who need supplies for schools this upcoming year, they're playing a sport. But I think Boston has the 4th highest tax bill in the NBA. And I'm trying to find the exact number.
Yeah, I think it's probably around 40 to 50 million.
I think it's 40 million. I think again, I'm trying to find the real number. Keith, unfortunately, is tweeting too many teachers that are looking for stuff. So again, I'm not going to, step on that really, but it's just trying to find the actual number. I think it's 40 million in tax. It's not like they're not spending enough tax. They're spending enough money. And the way I'm not going to drag his name to the mud here, but the way you could make the argument that they're not doing everything they possibly can to win a title this year, because they could have used that as an additional way to bring somebody onto the team. As you said, though, you don't know the offers that they were offered and turned down to not use that. Again, if if you just made Malcolm Brogdon 17.1 million, everybody would be thrilled. But it was a way for potentially them to improve the roster, and they didn't do it. And so you kind of have to say, like you kind of, and I'm not going to kill them for it, but there was a way for them to make the team better, and they didn't use it. And they have other TPEs that they can use, throughout the rest of the season that I have a little more time with. And I think to get someone of that caliber that makes that kind of money is tough before you know what your roster really looks like. As they go through, if they could have used that $17.1 million TPE during the season, I think they might have an easier time filling that spot, just because you will be able to see what this team looks like all together.
Yeah, maybe you need something. Yeah,
yeah.
There's maybe you need shooting. Maybe you need something like that. Yeah.
We don't really know what they really like on paper. This team, outside of this like backup big spot that we keep talking about, on paper, this team is loaded. Right?
Yeah.
It's just loaded. I'm not going to say might. They have the best defensive backcourt in the league, I think, kind of by a mile. As much as I like Chicago's defensive backcourt, I think Boston having like 4 guys that can really defend versus 2, that's impressive. But you look at, you'll get an idea of what everything looks like as you get towards the season, and they have other TPs they can use. But like with the way that the Warriors are spending money, and Joe Lacob like publicly saying like, we don't care about the tax bill right now, we'll just keep paying as much as we need to pay because we have, these 3 guys in their, later parts of their prime, and we still believe we can ride this out and win titles. I think the age of Jalen and Jason, like if they were in the Curry Clay range of ages, maybe that Steve and Wick and everybody else would be more willing to spend a little bit more. But I think the fact that Jalen and Jason are so young still, it's like, okay, our window is now, no question. But like, if everything goes right, we're going to still have more windows down the road. I think maybe that's why they haven't gone all the way yet.
Yeah. And also, you have to think of it like even the Warriors, right? They'll spend whatever, but they did just let Gary Payton Jr. walk. They did just let Otto Porter walk. That saved them a ton of luxury tax money. So it's like even the Warriors are conscious of that. And then, but I'm just thinking like from the Celtics side, if you think their championship hopes, dreams, odds, whatever, came down to using the TPE, then like, what are we doing? Right? Because it's for once they solidified their, top 10 rotation by now, right? Like they're solid 1 through 10. Like you're just adding depth at that point. So to bring in a player of substance, well, what if it cost you Derek White in a 1st-round pick to use that TPE? Would you want to do it? Like probably not. So that's just why I'm not overly again, if Brogdon wasn't on the roster and they didn't use that TPE, we have a much different discussion of them like really fumbling their offseason. But like if they can still find that veteran minimum big, like how is that any different from finding a $2 or $3 million big with the TPE money? It's just like we're splitting hairs, for lack of a better term. It's just unfortunate that after 600 days of TPE talk, that ultimately
I know it expired
out, but it wasn't like now their roster is screwed because they didn't use it. Like, what is Brad doing? I think he's earned the benefit of the doubt, where considering he hasn't missed since he took the job, if he didn't find a deal that was worth it, then I'm okay with him not doing it. It's like, I don't give a shit about Wick's money. Like he can pay whatever as far as I'm concerned, but like, if it didn't make basketball sense, then I'm okay with it. And if he's telling me there wasn't anything of substance, like I don't have reason to not believe him, because all he's done since he got the job is improve the roster. So I just think if their title hopes come down to them not using that TPE on like a minimum or lower salary guy, so much more went wrong than, it won't matter.
I agree with that. I think it's a little harsh, but you could make the argument. That's all.
You could. I can understand it. I imagine the doomers of the world that'll be a heavy talking point for them. But
I can't wait. It's going to be wonderful throughout the regular season. I can already tell.